The wind howled like a wounded animal across the open prairie, driving sheets of sleet against the weathered boards of Cole Maddox's ranch. The sky was a churn of dark iron, and the world beyond his porch had vanished into a white blur of snow and fury. Nights like this reminded Cole why he lived alone. No one sane traveled through such storms, and no one was foolish enough to knock on a man's door after dark. But that night someone did. The first sound was faint, a distant thudding carried by the wind. Cole thought it was a loose shutter banging until it came again, 3 sharp knocks, uneven and desperate. He set his coffee down and reached for his coat. The temperature dropped the moment he opened the cabin door, the storm clawing its way inside. Through the swirling snow, a figure stumbled toward him, a boy no older than 8, his face ghost pale beneath a tattered cap. The child's gloved hands clutched something, or rather someone, behind him. Cole's eyes adjusted, and he saw her. A woman, half collapsed, wrapped in a torn blanket, her hair crusted with frost. "Please," the boy gasped, his breath forming clouds in the cold. "Please, mister, help us." Cole's instincts took over before his mind could question it. He scooped the woman into his arms and ushered the boy inside, slamming the door against the storm's rage. The cabin filled with the hiss of wind dying behind thick wood, and for a moment, silence fell except for the crackling of the fire. He laid the woman on the couch near the hearth. Her skin was ice cold, her lips nearly blue. "Fetch that blanket off the bed," he ordered. The boy obeyed, trembling but swift. Cole stripped off his gloves and checked the woman's pulse, weak but steady. She was alive. "What's your name, son?" Cole asked, keeping his tone low. "Eli," the boy whispered. His voice cracked with exhaustion. "That's my mama." "Where were you two headed in weather like this?" Eli looked down, biting his lip. "Nowhere. We were running." Cole frowned. "From what?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he shuffled closer to his mother, brushing snowflakes from her hair. She stirred faintly, eyelids fluttering. Cole poured a cup of hot water and pressed it to her lips. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes, gray, clear, and weary, met his with a flicker of fear. "You're safe here, ma'am," he said quietly. "Storm'll pass by morning." But she didn't seem to believe him. Her gaze darted toward the windows, then the door, as if expecting something, or someone, to burst through at any moment. Eli tugged on Cole's sleeve. The boy's voice was barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "Mister, if they come, please hide my mom." The words froze Cole more thoroughly than the storm ever could. He straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. There it was, the shadow behind the story. They weren't travelers lost to bad weather. They were fugitives from something far worse. He wanted to ask who they were, but one look at the child's face stopped him. The fear there was old, too old for a boy his age. Cole had seen that look before, in war, in men who'd seen too much cruelty. He took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, son. Nobody's coming through that door tonight." The boy's shoulders sagged in relief, and he curled up beside his mother. Cole draped another blanket over them both, then sat back in his chair, rifle leaning close by. Outside, the wind screamed across the open plains. Inside, 3 souls, one broken man, one frightened woman, and one brave child, waited out the storm together. Cole didn't know it yet, but that knock on his door would change his life forever. Because some storms come from the sky, and others ride on horseback. By dawn, the storm had eased into silence. The ranch lay buried beneath a blanket of snow that shimmered gold under the rising sun. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, but warmth still lingered, a fragile peace after a long, sleepless night. Cole Maddox sat in his chair by the hearth, his rifle across his knees, watching over the woman and her boy as they slept. When Eli finally stirred, It was with the twitchy alertness of someone who had slept too long in danger. He blinked, then looked immediately for his mother. She was still resting, breathing slow and steady, the color back in her cheeks. Cole poured him a tin cup of warm milk and slid it across the table. "Morning, son," he said. "You held up well last night." Eli hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust the kindness. "Thank you, mister," he said softly. "You saved her." Cole shrugged. "Storm did most of the work. I just opened the door." The boy looked down into his cup. He was small for his age, thin, sharp-faced, like a kid who'd learned hunger too early. But there was something in his eyes that caught Cole off guard. Not just fear, but fierce protectiveness. The kind you only see in someone who's had to grow up before his time. "Your mama still asleep?" Cole asked. Eli nodded. "She doesn't sleep much, except when we're safe." Then, after a pause, he added, "You won't tell nobody we're here, right?" Cole leaned back in his chair, studying him. "I don't have visitors, boy. Nobody to tell." Still, Eli didn't relax. He chewed on his lower lip and said, almost to himself, "Sometimes they find us anyway." Cole frowned. "Who?" The boy's gaze flicked to the door. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "The men from town. The ones who hurt my mama." Cole felt the words like a punch to the chest. The tension in the room thickened. He had 100 questions, but none that seemed gentle enough to ask. "They after her?" he said finally. Eli nodded, eyes wide. "They said she's got something that belongs to them. I don't know what it is, but they keep looking. When my daddy died, they said Mama had to come back, or they'd make her." The simplicity of that sentence chilled him. There was no childlike confusion in Eli's tone. He knew what those men were capable of. Cole clenched his jaw. He'd heard enough in his lifetime to recognize the kind of fear that didn't fade when the sun came up. "Your daddy," Cole said quietly. "He one of them?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. "He was bad. But Mama ain't like them. She tried to leave before, but they always found us." For a long moment, Cole didn't speak. The fire popped and crackled, filling the silence between them. Then he said, "You did right coming here. No one will find you on this ranch." The boy's small shoulders relaxed a little, but not fully. He looked at Cole again, his expression deadly serious for someone so young. "If they come, please hide my mom," he whispered. "Don't let them take her. Not again." Cole's throat tightened. There was something raw in that plea, something that reminded him of another voice. Long ago, a different life and a different loss. The kind of promise a man makes only once and never forgets. He reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "Listen, Eli, I don't break my word. If they come, they'll have to go through me first." Eli blinked up at him, uncertain whether to believe it, but the faintest glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. Behind them, Clara stirred, whispering her son's name. Cole rose to his feet, the weight of his promise already settling on his shoulders. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, but the danger, he knew, was only just beginning. And for the first time in years, Cole Maddox felt that old fire in his chest, the one that burned when there was something worth defending. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its chill. Morning sunlight filtered through the frosted window panes, spilling across the cabin floor in muted gold. The world outside lay silent under a fresh crust of snow, but inside Cole Maddox's cabin, tension clung like smoke. Clara sat near the fire, wrapped in one of Cole's old wool blankets. Her face, though no longer ghost pale, was marked by exhaustion, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, hands trembling slightly as she sipped from a tin cup. The boy, Eli, sat close to her knees, silent, alert, his small frame angled protectively toward her as if daring the world to try again. Cole moved quietly about the cabin, pretending to busy himself with chores, pouring coffee, feeding the fire, checking the lock on the door twice, though it didn't need checking. He wasn't a man used to company. The sudden presence of strangers under his roof made every board creak louder, every glance feel weighted. "You two plan on staying long?" he asked finally, his voice low but firm. Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. "Just until it's safe," she murmured. "Safe from who?" Her answer came too quickly. "No one." That lie hung heavy in the air. Cole didn't press, but his eyes narrowed. He'd been a soldier once, and a man who'd fought for things worth bleeding for. He knew what fear looked like. And hers wasn't the kind that came from cold or hunger. It was the kind that came from being hunted. Eli watched the exchange, his body tensing as though expecting anger. When Cole didn't raise his voice, the boy relaxed a little, but his small hand crept toward his mother's skirt all the same. "You don't have to tell me your story," Cole said after a long pause, "but I'd rather not be caught in the middle of someone else's trouble." Clara looked up, her gray eyes sharp now. "You're not. We'll be gone as soon as the road clears." He studied her. There was a strength in her tone that surprised him, the stubborn kind that only comes from surviving too much. "That road won't clear for days," he said. "You ride out in this snow, you won't make it a mile." Eli's head turned sharply. "We can't stay, Mama," he whispered. "They'll find us again." Cole caught the fear in the boy's voice and the way Clara flinched at it. That told him everything words hadn't. He sighed, rubbing a calloused hand over his face. "You can stay till the thaw," he said gruffly. "After that, we'll figure it out." Clara's lips parted as if to protest, but then she simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Maddox." "Cole," he corrected. "Nobody calls me Mr." For the first time, something faintly like a smile ghosted across her face. It softened her features, and for a fleeting moment, he could almost see the woman she must have been before the fear, before the running. Still, the air between them remained heavy. Every sound, the wind moaning through the chimney, the crackle of the fire, seemed louder than it should be. Cole couldn't shake the feeling that danger was already on its way, drawn by the same instincts that told him this woman and her boy were telling only half the truth. Later, when he stepped outside to tend the horses, he found a scrap of torn fabric snagged on the fence line, dark, coarse, and fresh. A rider had passed through after the storm, maybe more than one. He returned to the cabin and quietly bolted the door. Clara looked up from the fire, reading the change in his eyes before he said a word. "You got someone looking for you," he said quietly. She didn't deny it this time. And in that moment, Cole Maddox knew the storm wasn't over. It had just changed form, trading snow and thunder for hooves and guns. Inside that cabin, 3 strangers shared a fragile peace. But beyond the ridgeline, something darker was stirring, and soon enough, it would find its way to them. Night came early on the plains that week. The storm had left behind a stillness that seemed almost unnatural, a world muffled in white as if holding its breath. Inside the cabin, the firelight flickered against rough-hewn walls, painting shadows that moved like memories. Cole Maddox sat at the table, cleaning his rifle out of habit more than need. Across from him, Clara stitched a torn sleeve with trembling hands. Eli slept nearby, curled up under a quilt too large for him, his face peaceful at last. Cole had given her 3 days. 3 days without questions. 3 days to rest, to breathe, to believe she was safe. But the silence between them had started to gnaw at him. He needed to know who she was and who might be coming for her. He looked up from his rifle. "You're running from someone, Clara." Her needle froze mid-stitch. "I told you, we just needed shelter." He shook his head slowly. "No, you needed hiding." He leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. "That boy's too scared for this to be about a storm." For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of the fire. Then, with a sigh that seemed to drain the strength from her, Clara set the needle down. "You're right," she said softly. "But once I tell you, you'll wish you hadn't asked." "I've lived through wars," he replied. "There ain't much left that can scare me." She gave a bitter smile. "You haven't met the men who are hunting me." Cole waited. He didn't push her. He just listened. Clara stared into the flames as if searching for courage there. "My husband, Thomas Hale, he wasn't a rancher like he claimed when we married. He was an outlaw, the kind that made even other criminals nervous. He ran with a gang called the Red Valley Riders. Robbers, killers, men who lived off the fear they sowed." Cole frowned. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Years ago, during his days as a cavalry scout, he'd heard tales of them, men who rode through frontier towns leaving fire and graves behind. "When Eli was born," she continued, "Thomas promised he'd change. He wanted to leave that life, said he was done with blood and greed, but the others wouldn't let him walk away. The gang's leader, Pike Granger, said Thomas owed him. He made him help rob a bank in Kansas, and Thomas never came back." Her voice broke then, thin as glass. "They came for me instead. Said Thomas had stolen something from them, gold, money, I don't know. They thought he left it with me. When I told them I didn't have it, they beat me. They scared Eli half to death, so we ran, and we've been running ever since." The fire popped, throwing sparks into the air. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen the kind of men she described, lawless, ruthless, convinced the world owed them. He could imagine exactly what they'd done to her, and the thought filled him with a slow, burning anger. "Why come this far west?" he asked quietly. "Because there's no law out here strong enough to protect us," she said. "I thought if we kept moving, they'd give up. But 2 nights ago, outside the canyon road, I saw their campfire. They're close." Cole rose and walked to the window, peering out into the dark expanse. The snow glowed faintly under the moonlight. Beautiful, calm, deceptive. "They won't find you here," he said finally. Clara looked up at him, disbelief and hope warring in her eyes. "You don't even know us?" "No," he said, turning back to face her. "But I know what it means to run out of places to hide." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, in the quiet, the faint cry of a coyote echoed over the valley. Clara shivered. Cole stepped closer, his voice low, steady, the way a mountain might speak to the wind. "You and that boy are safe here, Clara. I give you my word." And though she didn't know it yet, that promise, born from mercy, forged in silence, would soon turn into a war of its own. The following morning broke clear and sharp, the air so cold it seemed to bite the lungs. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of flawless blue stretched over the white plains. The ranch sat in that silence that only comes after a fight, the kind that feels like the world holding still before something else begins. Cole Maddox stood on the porch, steaming mug in hand, watching the sun climb over the hills. The land had been his refuge for years, the only thing he'd managed not to lose after the war. Every fence post, every scarred beam of the barn carried his sweat and solitude. It had been quiet here until Clara and Eli arrived. Now the quiet felt different, heavy, expectant. Inside, Clara was helping Eli warm up by the fire. The boys' laughter, soft, fleeting, echoed through the cabin. It startled Cole how much that sound filled the place. It had been years since laughter lived inside these walls. He set his mug down, gloved hands tightening around the railing. He should have sent them away already. He knew better than to invite other people's ghosts onto his land, but each time he looked at the boy's small frame or Clara's wary eyes, the thought of turning them out curdled in his gut. By the time he stepped back inside, Clara had set a pot of coffee on the stove. She glanced up, offering a quiet, grateful smile. "You've been kind, Mr. Maddox," she said. "More than we deserve." "Name's Cole," he corrected, pulling up a chair. "And I don't recall saying you could leave yet." She hesitated, drying her hands on a towel. "We've imposed long enough. You don't need our trouble." Cole studied her face, the bruises fading to pale yellow, the way she still flinched at sudden noises. Trouble had already found her, and she'd been running from it far too long. He could see it plain as day. "You said they're close," he said. "That true?" She nodded once, reluctantly. "They'll come. Pike Granger doesn't stop until he gets what he wants. And he wants revenge." Cole leaned back, boots thudding softly against the floorboards. "Then it's time he met someone who doesn't scare easy." Clara's eyes widened. "No, I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask," he cut in, voice steady. "I'm telling you." For a moment, silence settled between them. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock and the hiss of the fire. Clara's lips parted, as if to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. She realized then that this man wasn't doing it out of pity. There was a weight behind his words, a promise forged in the same steel that once carried him through battle. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know us." Cole's gaze softened. "I know what it's like to lose everything you can't fight for anymore. And I'm damn tired of standing by while people like that run free." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but her voice caught. Eli stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about his mother, and Cole's expression gentled even further. He rose, reaching for his hat and rifle. "I'll ride out to the ridge before sundown," he said. "Check the valley. If there's anyone coming, I'll see him first." Clara stood there, trembling slightly, torn between fear and relief. "You're risking your life for strangers." Cole looked back at her from the doorway, the wind tugging at his coat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "ain't nobody a stranger once they've bled on your floor." He stepped out into the cold, his silhouette framed against the fading light. The sky bled red over the horizon, the kind of red that warned of change. That night, as the sun sank and shadows stretched long across the snow, Clara watched from the window while Cole disappeared into the hills, one man against a storm of his own making. And though she didn't yet understand it, his choice to protect them had already sealed all their fates. For a few rare days, peace returned to the Maddox Ranch. The wind softened, the sky stretched wide and clean, and the snow began to melt in glittering rivulets that ran down from the hills. Winter's grip loosened, and for the first time in weeks, Clara could breathe without fear clawing at her throat. Life on the ranch found a rhythm, a slow, steady heartbeat of work and warmth. Cole rose before dawn, the way he always had, to tend the horses and check the fences. Clara joined him sometimes, her skirts tucked up, her fingers raw from mending and hauling water. Eli followed along behind them, a small shadow carrying feed buckets half his size, proud to be useful. Each day they built something invisible between them, a fragile trust born not from words but from small acts, a shared meal. A fire kept burning through the night. A door left unlocked. Cole hadn't realized how much he missed the sound of another voice in the mornings, or the sight of laughter. Clara had a soft smile that appeared rarely, but when it did, it changed the whole room, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He caught himself watching for it more than he should have, and Eli, bright, watchful Eli, had become something of a spark in the old rancher's quiet life. He followed Cole everywhere, peppering him with questions about the horses, about the rifle, about the war. At first, Cole's answers were short and practical, but gradually the boy's curiosity broke through his guarded silence. "Were you ever scared, Mr. Cole?" Eli asked one morning, riding beside him on a borrowed pony. Cole's gaze stayed on the horizon. Every man's scared, son. Only difference is what he does with it. Eli nodded solemnly, as if committing those words to memory. That night, Clara served stew at the table, her own recipe, made from what little they had. Cole couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for him. The smell of thyme and smoke filled the cabin. For a brief, flickering moment, it felt like home again. But even peace has an expiration date. Late one evening, as the fire burned low and Eli slept soundly, Clara sat at the table mending Cole's old coat. Her hands were steady, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "You should have let us go," she said. Cole looked up from his chair. "That's the second time you've said that." "Because it's true," she replied. "You don't owe us anything, and those men, if they find us here, they'll come for you too." Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've faced men like them before." "Not for me, you haven't," she said quietly. "You don't know what Pike's capable of." He met her gaze, unwavering. "Then let him come. I'm done turning my back on things that need standing against." Something in his tone silenced her. The firelight painted his face in shades of amber and shadow, and for a heartbeat, Clara saw the man beneath the gruffness, the soldier who had lost too much and still refused to give up what little goodness he had left. Her breath trembled. "Why are you doing this, Cole?" He hesitated. "Because that boy of yours shouldn't grow up thinking the world only takes. Someone's got to show him it can still give." The cabin fell quiet after that. The only sounds were the wind outside and the slow, steady crack of the logs in the hearth. When Clara finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "Then may God help you, Mr. Maddox, because Pike won't." Outside, far across the frozen valley, a crow took flight, its black wings cutting through the pale morning sky. Tracks were beginning to appear again on the snow-dusted ridge. The peace that had wrapped the Maddox ranch like a fragile dream was beginning to thin, and though none of them said it aloud, they all felt it in their bones. The calm was ending. The storm was coming back, this time with gunpowder and vengeance riding on its wind. The thaw came slow that week. The snow retreated in uneven patches, leaving behind mud and brittle grass that crunched under boot heels. The air was sharp, clear, and too still, like the land itself was listening. Cole Maddox felt it first, the way an old soldier feels a shift in the wind before the gunfire starts. Something was wrong. The quiet wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was waiting. He rose before dawn that morning, saddled his horse, and rode the ridge that overlooked his land. The rising sun painted the horizon in bruised shades of pink and orange. Below, the wide valley stretched for miles, untouched, silent, and vast. But when he reached the edge of the east pasture, his horse snorted and stopped. Cole dismounted, crouching low near the fence line. The snow there was disturbed. Boot prints, fresh ones, cut through the crust, half frozen but clear enough to read. 6 sets, maybe 7, heavy riders. He followed the trail a short distance until he found what he feared most, the black, greasy remains of a fire hidden in the draw. Someone had camped there overnight, someone watching the ranch. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen this pattern before, the calm before an ambush, the patient circle of wolves. When he returned home, Clara was on the porch, hanging wet laundry, the sunlight glinting off her hair. She turned at the sound of his horse. The look on his face froze her mid-motion. "What is it?" she asked. "Riders," he said simply, swinging down. "Been here sometime last night. Keeping low." She paled, her hands gripping the railing. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Her lips trembled. "Then they found us." Cole met her gaze, steady as stone. "No, not yet. But they will if we're not careful." He moved through the cabin like a man possessed. Windows were shuttered, oil lamps trimmed, doors reinforced with timber. He laid out 2 rifles on the table, cleaned and loaded, then began checking ammunition. Clara watched him in silence until her fear finally broke through. "Cole, please," she said, stepping closer. "You can't fight them all. Pike's men aren't like regular outlaws. They don't care who they kill." Cole glanced up, his voice low but firm. "I've fought men worse than him. This isn't your war." He paused, the rag in his hand tightening. "It is now." For a long moment, they stood facing each other. The frightened woman and the man who made peace with danger years ago. The fire crackled softly between them, throwing shadows on the walls. Eli appeared from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Mama?" he mumbled. "What's wrong?" Clara forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just go pack your things." Cole looked at her sharply. "You're not running." She turned on him, voice breaking. "You don't understand. They'll burn this place to the ground for us. I won't have you die because of me." Cole stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "Clara, listen to me. Running's kept you alive, but it hasn't kept you free. If you keep running, Eli grows up afraid of his own shadow. You stay, and I'll make sure he grows up with something else. Hope." Her eyes filled, tears trembling but refusing to fall. "You don't even know if you can stop them." He gave a faint, grim smile. "No, but I sure as hell know they can't stop me easy." Outside, a crow cawed from the ridge. A second call answered it from far away, 2 sharp echoes in the stillness. Cole's head lifted. He knew the sound wasn't from birds. It was the old signal. Men on horseback, whistling to each other across the valley. He crossed to the door, checking the latch one last time. Then, quietly, to himself more than to her, he said, "It's starting." Clara's knees weakened. The color drained from her face as she whispered, "How long do we have?" Cole's eyes swept the horizon, cold and sure. "Till nightfall." And as the sun sank low, staining the snowfields in blood-red light, the ranch stood still, a lone fortress waiting for the storm to ride in from the east. The warning had come. The wolves were on the move. By sundown, the valley had gone quiet. Too quiet. The light faded fast, leaving the world washed in bruised purple and blood-red hues. Cole Maddox stood at the edge of his porch, his rifle cradled in his arms, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the frozen creek. Every instinct in his body hummed like a taut wire. The wolves were coming. He could feel it. Inside the cabin, Clara was packing what little food they had left into a small sack. Eli sat on the floor beside her, trying to be brave but trembling with every distant sound. The horses in the barn had gone restless, snorting and stamping at the dirt as if they too sensed the coming storm. Cole stepped back inside, closing the door softly behind him. "They're out there," he said simply. "Maybe 6 of them. Maybe more." Clara froze. "What do we do?" He met her eyes, calm and steady. "You and the boy go to the root cellar. Take the lantern and stay quiet. You don't come out till I say." She shook her head fiercely. "No, I won't leave you out there alone." "Yes, you will," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If they see you, they'll use you against me. You want to help? Keep him safe." Eli looked up at him, wide-eyed. "You'll be okay, Mr. Cole?" Cole crouched down beside him, his voice low, steady. "You remember what I told you, son? Every man's scared. Only difference is what he does with it." Eli nodded, swallowing hard. "Good," Cole said, ruffling his hair gently. "Now go with your mama. Be brave for her." As Clara guided Eli down into the cellar beneath the kitchen floor, Cole moved with the efficiency of a man who'd faced death before. He set out his ammunition, checked the rifle sights, and doused all but one lamp, letting the darkness swallow the cabin. The night outside deepened, thick and still. Then came the sound he'd been waiting for, the crunch of hooves on frost, slow and deliberate. Voices carried through the air, muffled but close. "Place looks quiet," one man said. "Reckon she's inside?" Another chuckled low. "She's here. Pike said the boy'd lead us right to her. Poor fool of a woman thought she could hide behind some washed-up soldier." Cole's eyes narrowed. He moved to the window and spotted them through the shadows. 6 riders, dressed in long coats, rifles slung across their backs. One of them dismounted, kicked open the barn door, and stepped inside. The horses screamed in panic. Cole exhaled slowly, centering himself. "All right," he murmured. "Let's begin." The first shot shattered the night. The outlaw in the barn dropped before he could even draw. Panic erupted among the rest. They scrambled for cover, shouting orders and curses. Gunfire cracked across the valley, echoing off the ridge. The cabin's windows shattered, glass flying like ice. Cole ducked behind the table, reloading with calm precision, firing in measured rhythm, never wasting a bullet. "Spread out!" one of the riders yelled. "Flush him out!" But Cole knew the land better than they ever could. Every inch of that ranch had been built by his hands, every fence, every shadow. He used the darkness, moving between cover, his rifle speaking in short, deadly bursts. Through the chaos, Clara held Eli close in the cellar, her hand over his mouth to stifle his cries. Dust rained from the ceiling with every shot. She prayed silently, gripping the small cross around her neck until her knuckles went white. Above them, the battle raged like thunder. When the shooting paused, a voice cut through the cold, harsh, mocking. "Cole Maddox, you got something that don't belong to you. Send her out, and maybe we'll let you keep breathing." Cole wiped blood from a shallow cut on his temple, eyes burning. He stepped into the doorway, rifle in hand, silhouetted by the flickering lantern light. "Tell Pike Granger," he growled, "if he wants her, he can come take her himself." The words rolled across the snow like thunder, and in that moment, even the outlaws felt it, the weight of a man with nothing left to lose. The silence that followed was brief. Then the gunfire roared again, fierce and relentless. The siege had truly begun. Smoke curled through the cabin, mixing with the sharp tang of gunpowder. Each shot from outside thudded into the walls like hammer blows. The shutters splintered, the floor shook, and the night seemed to close in, pressing against the small wooden house as if the darkness itself wanted to swallow it whole. Cole Maddox crouched low behind the overturned table, reloading his rifle by touch and instinct. His hands were steady, though his breath came ragged. He could feel the weight of time bearing down, every battle he'd survived, every grave he'd left behind. It all led here, to this moment. Outside, a man shouted, "We got him pinned! Burn him out!" Cole's heart kicked hard in his chest. Fire. That was their plan, to smoke him, Clara, and the boy out like animals. He rose fast, swung his rifle toward the front door, and fired twice. The nearest outlaw fell backward into the snow, his torch scattering sparks across the ground. Cole moved quickly, boots pounding across the floorboards as he checked the back window. Shadows darted through the dark, 3 men circling wide, rifles drawn. They meant to flank him. He ducked down, grabbed his revolver, and slipped through the back door into the biting cold. The air sliced at his face, sharp and unforgiving. The moon hung low, turning the snow into a sheet of silver. He crouched behind the water trough and waited. The first outlaw came around the corner, muttering under his breath. Cole fired once, clean, quick. The man dropped without a sound. Another followed, and Cole met him halfway, slamming the butt of his rifle into the man's jaw. The crack echoed in the night. From the ridge, a familiar voice called out, cruel and amused. "You can't win, Maddox. You're one man." Cole froze, recognizing that voice, Pike Granger. The name alone turned his stomach. A man he once rode beside, years ago, back when blood was easy and mercy was rare. Cole straightened, standing tall in the open yard. His breath rose in pale clouds. You should have stayed gone, Pike. Pike laughed, the sound cold as steel. And missed the chance to finish what you started? She's mine, Maddox. You're just keeping her warm. The words struck like a knife. Inside, Clara could hear every word. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, tears welling. Eli clung to her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, is he gonna be okay?" She swallowed hard. He's the only man who ever will be. Outside, Cole adjusted his grip on the rifle, eyes locked on the flickering lantern light where Pike stood half hidden among his men. "You want her," he growled, voice rising with the wind. "Then come take her, but you'll go through me first." The words rolled out heavy and final, a promise, a challenge. Then the valley exploded in noise. Gunfire roared again, fierce and blinding. Sparks lit the snow as bullets tore through fences and posts. Cole moved like a shadow, shoot, shift, reload, fire again. He was everywhere at once, a single man holding ground against a pack of wolves. One outlaw fell near the barn, another screamed from the tree line, the smell of burned powder mixed with pine and blood. Pike's men wavered, confused, panicked. They weren't fighting a rancher anymore. They were facing something older, harder, carved out of war and loss. When the smoke began to thin, only 2 riders remained. Pike among them. He dismounted slowly, revolver drawn, grin spreading across his scarred face. "You don't get to play hero, Maddox," he sneered. "You're just another killer hiding behind a woman and a kid." Cole stepped forward, chest heaving, eyes burning like coals. "You're half right," he said. "I am a killer, but I'm done hiding." They faced each other across the snow, the world narrowing to 2 men, one old wound. Somewhere behind him, from the cellar, a faint voice broke the silence, Eli's small whisper trembling through the floorboards. "Please, mister, if they come, hide my mom." Cole's eyes hardened. He cocked his rifle. "Son," he muttered under his breath, "I ain't hiding her this time." And as the final showdown began, Cole Maddox stepped into the open, the man who once ran from war now becoming it. The world had gone quiet again, too quiet for what had just happened. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the smoke, catching the faint orange glow of dying embers near the barn. The land looked like a painting smeared with ash and blood. Cole Maddox stood in the yard, his breath misting in the cold, rifle hanging loosely at his side. His face was streaked with dirt and powder. His shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him, but he barely felt it. He was staring at Pike Granger. The outlaw stood 20 paces away, revolver drawn, a cruel smile twisting beneath his hat brim. Around him, the bodies of his men lay still in the snow. Only the wind moved now. "Looks like it's just us again," Pike said, voice rough from smoke. "Always figured it'd end this way." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Then let's end it." Pike laughed, though it came out more like a growl. "You could have walked away, Maddox. You could have left her to me. But no, you had to play savior." Cole lifted his rifle, steady despite the pain. "You talk too much." The gunfight broke the silence like thunder. 2 shots, then 3. Muzzle flashes split the night. Pike staggered first, clutching his side, firing wildly as he fell to one knee. Cole took another hit across his arm but stood his ground, teeth clenched. The final shot rang out clear and sharp. Pike fell backward into the snow, the life leaving his eyes before his body even hit the ground. The echo faded into the hills. For a long time, Cole didn't move. He stood breathing hard, watching the steam rise from Pike's body. When he finally lowered his rifle, the world seemed to sigh with him. He turned toward the cabin, where the door creaked open slowly. Clara emerged, her hair loose, her face pale in the moonlight. Eli clung to her hand, eyes wide but unafraid now. "Cole," she whispered, stepping forward, voice trembling, "you're hurt." "I've been worse," he said, forcing a faint smile. She reached him, placing a trembling hand against his chest. "You shouldn't have done this for us." He looked down at her, his voice soft but firm. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because it needed doing. Because no one ever came when I called for help. I wasn't about to let that happen to him." Eli stepped closer, peeking up at the man who'd stood between him and death. "You really weren't scared?" the boy asked. Cole chuckled faintly, kneeling down despite the pain. "Course I was. Every man's scared, son. Only difference is, you keep moving anyway." Eli nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in his young eyes. Behind them, the first light of dawn began to rise over the hills. The snow shimmered gold. Smoke from the barn curled into the sky like a prayer. Clara wrapped her arms around Cole's shoulders, her voice breaking. "You've given us back our lives. I don't know how to thank you." He looked out over the valley, quiet again, except for the wind. "You don't owe me nothing. Just don't run anymore." She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. "We won't." Cole turned toward the ridge where Pike had fallen. The past, at last, was buried under snow and silence. For the first time in years, he felt the weight in his chest lift, a man unburdened. He holstered his revolver, adjusted his coat, and exhaled deeply. "Reckon it's time to start living again," he murmured. Clara smiled through her tears. "Together?" He gave her a slow nod. "Together." Eli reached for Cole's hand, small fingers gripping his calloused palm. The rancher looked down, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. As the sun broke over the mountains, the three of them stood in the snow, tired, scarred, but alive. The land that had once been a battlefield was now something else entirely. A home. And though Cole Maddox knew ghosts would always ride the edges of his memory, for the first time, he didn't mind, because this time, when trouble came, he wouldn't face it alone.